I have to ask you about this. There's a very viral clip of someone telling a story about you.
Favorite President Trump story.
You had a meeting with a leader of the Taliban.
We were losing a lot of soldiers with the Taliban in Afghanistan.
When we were negotiating with the Taliban, it's President Trump and Mike Pompeo, and they were talking to Taliban leadership. President Trump looked at the Taliban leader and said this: "I want to leave Afghanistan."
And he said, if you hurt any Americans, I will kill you.
And he said, "If you harm a hair on a single American, I'm going to kill you."
And you gave him a picture of his house and his location.
Reached in his pocket, pulled out a satellite photo of the Taliban's home,
That's what the rumor is.
and handed it to him. Shut up. Got up and walked out the room.
I just want to verify if that's a true.
Well, I'm not allowed to comment on it, really. But let's put it this way. For 18 months...
You know, for 18 months, not a single American was killed in Afghanistan.
For 18 months, we didn't lose any. We didn't lose one soldier. Not one.
That's how President Trump ruled.
And then I left, and these clowns took over. And then we had the worst, that whole situation was horrible, right? With the airlift and the whole thing.
It doesn't take a genius to see that social media is controlling information in a way that will sway the voting actions of the people. What you should be asking is, who do they want you to vote for? And then you should ask, why?
Everybody forever was like, Kamala Harris is the worst vice president. She's the least popular vice president of all time. And then in a moment in time, all of a sudden she's our solution. She's our hero. Everybody's with her. All these social media posts about her. Try Googling a negative story on her. You won't find one.
So I fashioned a little experiment. I asked Masashi to simulate a YouTube search using the following criteria. As you can see, there is a story about an insult from Trump. I called back a favorite curse word, the bad to worse claim, which is downplayed. They claim that Trump is a fascist, a worst habit, a story about almost having to fight over a demeaning question. I watched the video and it wasn't really demeaning. There's a puff piece here about her having been, at some point, Montel Williams' arm candy, as if anyone gives a shit. Totally irrelevant, soft bullshit, and a couple of jabs at Trump. For the other side of the experiment, I asked Masashi to repeat the same simulation, replacing the name with Donald Trump. We have a positive story about Harris, who hits back after being insulted. Same story as before. Biden saying Trump is the worst. A story that says Biden is the worst. Odd, because he wasn't a part of the clearing. Trump can't be saved. We have CNN asking, will Trump go down as the worst president? We have accusations that Trump is a fascist. We have references to Hitler. And then we have a couple of stories that say that Trump is the worst. And finally, an implication that Trump's wife is infatuated with Justin Trudeau. The contrast in representation of these two searches is stark, and pop media coverage is no different. It is evident that we are meant to approve of one candidate over the other. A clear message appears in the subtext saying, do not vote in this particular direction. For this reason, I have requested that Musashi present us with some reasons not to vote for the chosen candidate being hoisted up on a pedestal by social media.
Well, if anything, would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
For so many voters, we know that a huge issue for them is the economy. It's the cost of living. Our new NBC News poll shows that more voters think that the Biden administration policies have hurt them rather than helped them. Are the last 4 years an obstacle to you in this race?
Let me be very clear. Mine will not be a continuation of the Biden administration. I bring my own experiences, my own ideas to it.
Would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind. Mine will not be a continuation of the Biden administration.
Yeah, because she's a retard. So those are her three ways she talks, and those are the wine mom phases.
Do you think they have her medicated?
Cost of groceries still too high. The voters know it. I know it.
Would you have done something differently?
There is not a thing that comes to mind.
Cost of housing, bringing down the cost of housing,
There is not a thing that comes to mind.
expand the child tax credit.
Would you have done something differently?
There is not a thing that comes to mind.
So my plans and my policies will not be a continuation of the Biden administration. I bring my own experiences, my own ideas to it.
Would you have done something differently?
Economists have reviewed my economic plan, have found that my plans will strengthen Americans' economy. My plans are focused on working people.
Donald Trump came to the Detroit Economic Club.
Detroit, what up, though?
And stood in front of the Ford Motor executives and said, if you close these factories as you're planning to do in Detroit and build them in Mexico, I'm going to put a 35% tariff on those cars when you send them back and nobody's going to buy them.
His so-called plan for the economy, economists have estimated, will exacerbate inflation and invite a recession by the middle of next year.
I had to break in here to make a point. To
Exacerbate inflation
would be a good thing. I am certain that the word she meant to choose would be exacerbate.
Now, what does exacerbate mean?
It means to make things worse.
Right. Totally different thing. And this is a person with a law degree.
It was an amazing thing to see. No politician, Republican or Democrat, had ever said anything like that to these executives. And it was music to the ears of people in Michigan, Detroit, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin.
What up, though?
First, it comes out, Joe Biden, you're a racist. The Democrats were looking for an alternative to Bernie Sanders that wasn't Biden. She starts going up in the polls, right? In 2019, second debate comes out. Tulsi, being a good Hawaiian, knows how to roast a pig. Tulsi nuked her in that second debate. And if you looked at charts at the time, she's kind of, Officer Harris is like doing okay. She goes on Anderson Cooper and she's like, well, I'm a top tier candidate, so of course people are going to take shots at me. She immediately starts going down the polls. It's that day. You can see it. It was BBC, LA Times, Reuters, New Yorker. All the articles at the time didn't mention Tulsi once. A guy from the Washington Post just did a piece looking back on her campaign, didn't mention Tulsi either. They completely pretend it didn't happen. So,
Ta-da!
Okay, you've got me started, Officer Harris. In the same way in the 60s, if you sat on the show and said Liberace's gay, people would yell at you because you've never seen him sucking a dick.
Right.
People right now will be like, it's impossible.
I don't think there would be anymore.
You don't think so?
No.
You don't think there's a lot of people that would think you're crazy?
Like regular people. Why are we saying that? We're not making something up.
No, what I'm saying is, for George Soros to be anti-Semitic, you're anti-Semitic.
Often when there is dissent expressed in the United States, people here are called anti-Semitic. What is your response to that as an Israeli Jew?
Well, it's a trick. We always use it.
Was it difficult?
Not at all. Not at all. It created new.
No feeling of guilt. No, whether I was there or not, I was only a spectator.
The property was being taken away.
And they are not ready to hear criticism. And it's very easy to blame people who criticize as anti-Semitics and to bring up the Holocaust and the suffering of the Jewish people.
Right. If you're going after Officer Harris, you're either racist or sexist or ableist.
Right.
So they will use... Yeah, because he's a retard. He's literally retarded. I mean, Ukraine is a country in Europe, and Russia is another country, and a powerful country, and Russia invaded Ukraine, and that's wrong.
What's really important is what can be unburdened by what has been.
I think of her as America's wine mom, because it seems like she's 3 deep by noon. And she's got the 3 phases of wine mom. She's got happy drunk, cackling. Then there is trying to drunk at work, where you're trying to make sense, but you don't. Space is around us all and unites us all and inspires us all.
Do you have any plans to visit the border?
At some point,
The border is the most unsafe border anywhere in the world.
we are going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I don't understand the point that you're making.
Yeah, because she's a retard. And then there's, I'm being stern so you don't realize how plastered I am, and I'm making a point. That little girl was me. Now I'm going to go upstairs and don't knock on the door because I'm going to pass out.
Do you think the country is ready now for a woman and a woman of color to be president? Absolutely. Absolutely. And I am saying that in terms of every walk of life of our country. You know, I think part of what is important in this election is really not only turning the page, but closing the page and the chapter on an era that suggests that Americans are divided.
I'm being stern so you don't realize how plastered I am, and I'm making a point. Did you see that piece by Seymour Hersh about the coup?
Yes.
The big issue is, how do you get Biden out of the White House? So here's Biden's case. He's like, look, I got Trump out of the White House last time. I'm only behind 2 or 3 points in the polls. Kamala's polling worse than me in like 8 out of 10 polls. I won these delegates. Why the hell should I back down? And that's a very solid case. Jill, as Hunter put it, she's a selfish, silly, entitled. That was how Hunter described her.
Whoa.
Yeah, we have the text. For the first time in her life, people care about her. She matters.
But if there was ever a time to invoke the 25th Amendment, wouldn't you think this is the time?
Sure, but hold on. So Seymour Hersh, who's been around D.C. since the 60s, he had a thing on his Substack that goes, Biden got the call. And it was Obama, Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries. So he said, we got Kamala on board to invoke the 25th. If you don't drop the nomination, that's what's going to happen.
The enemy from within.
Biden got the call about the coup. We got Kamala on board to invoke the 25th. If you don't drop the nomination, that's what's going to happen.
And let's be clear about who he considers to be the enemy from within.
Obama, Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries.
And even said that he would go after American citizens.
There's a game that's being played. It's not real democracy. It's controlled parties.
Now, Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite. She put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana.
Go after American citizens.
She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so.
Go after American citizens.
She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California.
Go after American citizens.
And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
Go after American citizens.
She'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about
anyone who refuses to bend a knee or dares to criticize. She'll go after American citizens, like judges, like journalists, like nonpartisan election officials.
I was a Democrat for over 20 years.
They come after their political opponent.
Today's Democrat Party is completely unrecognizable.
They did something that's only done in third world countries. They came after their political opponent. I've been under investigation more than Alphonse Capone, only because it's political opponent stuff.
The liberals are now pro-silencing criticism.
Pro-censorship.
They're pro-censorship online.
Anti-freedom. Pro-open borders.
And they're regulating the First Amendment.
And pro-war. They care more about power and feeding the military-industrial complex than they care about you, the American people.
It's bananas to watch. The rebels are Republicans now.
Independent-minded people who love our country and are committed to the Constitution and to freedom.
You want to buck the system? You're a conservative now.
And it is because of my love for our country that I'm proud to announce that I'm joining the Republican Party.
We hate Trump. The elites hate Trump. Hate Trump. Corporate America hates Trump. Wall Street hates Trump. The career politicians hate Trump.
It's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Because you'd be in jail.
It's an amazing thing to see. The media hates Trump.
This is a dangerous, stupid white man in a suit, and that's a bad combination.
Jimmy Kimmel's a loser.
After they loved him and created him.
It is my esteemed pleasure to introduce Mr. and Mrs. Donald Trump.
Mr. Donald! Oh my God!
You hate Trump! Donald the and any fan of mine who's a supporter of his, I'm drawing in the sand of line. You're either for or against. And if you can't decide who you like more in your split on who you should stand beside, I'll do it for you with this. We hate Trump!
We don't want men playing in women's sports. We want to have borders. We want to have fair elections. Little things like that. Common sense, right?
And this is why, in the eyes of the Democrat Party, they will do everything possible to try to destroy him. You'll see how they have weaponized the federal government.
It's true.
They have weaponized law enforcement, the Department of Justice.
Common sense. It's true.
They have done everything possible to try to remove him from the ballot, so we the people don't even have the choice who we want to vote for. Why have they done this?
Many are openly comparing Donald Trump to Adolf Hitler. Yes. That's pretty common.
We are very close to World War III.
It is deeply troubling and incredibly dangerous that Donald Trump would invoke Adolf Hitler.
New York's Daily News ran this front page earlier this week. Trump is Hitler.
That's what the rumor is.
Thank you for ruining my life. It doesn't get much worse than Trump is Hitler.
Everybody's always blaming me for everything.
Incredibly dangerous.
Before COVID, intelligence services colluded with big tech to have Trump suspended off Twitter.
They have done everything possible to try to remove him from the ballot, so we the people don't even have the choice who we want to vote for.
Yes, the same platform which hosted the Taliban and Ayatollah deaf to Israel Khomeini. They thought the president crossed the line when he tweeted on Jan 6, quote, remain peaceful, no violence, respect the law, and our great men and women in blue.
Why have they done this?
Incredibly dangerous.
Well, this is like master gaslighting and propaganda.
So there's a huge difference between he and I.
Yeah, because she's a retard.
Trump's election is going to be the biggest you ever recorded in human history. And it will feel
USA.
good.
It can't be or regarded by what he's been. You know?
Pantsuit with a pussy belt.
Yeah, she's a retard.
You know?
She's literally retarded.